Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. I'm Dayal here with Kishore and Achyuta, tuning in live from New York with our live virtual studio audience. So glad that you guys are tuning in live. So glad that you guys are listening wherever you are tuning in from. And really, really glad to be here. How are we doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I was gonna wait for Achita to say something, but I was like, she's always waiting for me. I'm always waiting for her.
I'm like bursting into the conversation. I'm like, blah, welcome on, we're here. And then I'm like, how are you guys doing? You're like, no, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first.
Today was my first time coming to New York City, like Manhattan. I live in New York, but I'm in Brooklyn. Like early in the morning for the first time in a really long time. Like I got on the train at 7 a.m. and I used to do that stuff all the time. And today was the first time in a really long time, and it was a very interesting experience. And I will leave it at that. So I had a great, interesting New York morning. How are you, Chuta?
Much less interesting than your interesting New York morning. I don't think you can just leave it at that. Like I did you get assaulted by a homeless man? Like what happened to you? Did you get caught up in the wave of humans? Like what I need to know.
No, nothing too dramatic. But I think it was just like the energy of like everyone going to work at 7 a.m. Like I hadn't experienced that in a really long time. And it was really strange because I think like I'm in my bubble usually at my work from home little, Brooklyn apartment that I really love so much. And even just like the vibes, as you know, Chutza, like when you go to Queens, it's very different than Manhattan. When you go to Brooklyn, it's very different than Manhattan. And I just forgot how weird it is. Like I kind of felt like I was like in a 1984 situation. Like it was just like, am I a robot? Like, is everyone a robot? Are we just like going to work? And it was really interesting. And I guess I'll kick it off. I remember when I was a kid growing up in New York City, I think I was like six or something like that, or maybe five. And I remember one of the first thing that my dad told to me on the subway, he was like, don't look at people. And I was like a child, and I was just like, what? Why? Because I think he caught me like staring at some person, and I was staring because I was like interested in the person, like they looked cool. I was like, oh, cool people. And my dad was like, don't look at people. Don't look at people in the eye. Like you never know. They could be crazy. They could come for you. Like they could this, they could that. Like he was just instilling so much fear into me as like a 5-year-old child. And I was like, okay. And I was just kind of like chanting my job in the train this morning, like looking around, like observing. And I was just like, no one is looking at each other. Like everyone is just staring down. Everyone is just like covered in so many layers. And I don't know, I was just like having a cool existential like moment of like Maya's covering us in so many layers and everyone's covered in so many layers. I was like, this is weird. It was just weird. But anyway, what's your purport to that, Achita? Because I saw you nodding your head a lot.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I think I wrote like I was a English major in college and I had to write a like it was like a novelized paper about I don't know what. And part of it was like this trip on the subway, and it was kind of like autobiographical. I remember because I went to school in the city, did all kinds of things in the city. I loved being in the city once I got there. Sometimes the trek getting there was always like a little bit like oh. But yeah, and it's funny to see how it hasn't changed really in decades. Like it's always the same energy and it's really really passionate, but mindlessly passionate. It's not like
Mm,
intentionally passionate. And then I saw a meme recently and I was like, you know what? That's totally true. And it said New Yorkers are kind but not nice.
mm,
And people from California are nice but not kind. And
mm,
then they were like, usually New Yorkers go, mm-hmm, and people from California are like, what?
mm.
But they're like, we'll explain to you what we mean by that. It's like New Yorkers, they won't look at you in the face. They will not say a word to you. But if they see you struggling with a baby stroller, one random nameless New Yorker will carry it down the stairs for you, walk away, and not say another word. Because like we got things to do. There's like too much going on. So they're kind, but not necessarily nice. And then they were saying the vibe
Mm,
on the West Coast is a little bit different. Sometimes people can be really, really nice. And they'll say good morning and do all the things, but kind of just like watch you struggle, like what's going on over there. So I thought that was like really kind of like an apt description, at least for New York. It is kind of it's really true. New Yorkers are really kind, but they're not going to look you in the eye or talk to you or make nice comment. I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting.
Pasha confirmed. And I can say I live in both worlds. I lived in the West Coast my entire life till 23, moved to New York, been here the last 15 years. Pasha says it's very true. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm very nice but rarely kind. No, that last note she didn't say. She's got her mouth open wrong. Sorry.
I,
Lane will
I
confirm. I'll check with Lane later about that one.
I remember the first time, one of the first like memories I have of visiting California. I was in one of those the trolley whatever things in San Francisco, and my mom and I were on it, and people some guy was just like, "Good morning, how are you doing?" And my mom and I were both just like, "Why are you talking to us? This is very uncomfortable." Like we were just so confused. Like people were just so nice. And I'm really interested in this actually because I think it's such a an interesting topic that you brought up, Achuta. It's like, because we've been talking about boundaries, we've been talking about identity, we've been talking about putting people in boxes, we've been talking about our spiritual lives not being dependent on like how people view us or how they think we're supposed to fit into their roles and their boxes and their this and etc. And I'm really struggling with this. I don't know if that's not, I might be exaggerating. I'm not struggling, but it's something that's been on my mind. And it's been on my mind for a long time because this word authenticity, and we strive to be authentic. We were talking about this yesterday, Achuta, after the call a little bit, right? Like we want to be authentic. Like this space for the podcast is a place for us to be authentic and share what our real, lives and bhakti look like. But I'm always like wondering what is the boundary and what is if being authentic is one thing, on the other side you have like a sense of I do have roles to play in society, and there might be a certain like social context that I have to, perform in or do or have some sort of tact to understand the situation that I'm in. I can't just be like, well, I just am who I am and I do what I want. And like this, like there is some, I don't know, like unsigned contract that we sign in the material world being like, yeah, I'm a part of society. I choose to live here. And therefore, like, I know what to do in et cetera situation. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And I guess my like my question is like, where is it I I just am who I am and I do what I do and I say what I say, right? When does that move from being authentic to being like, I don't know what the word is, but like boisterous or unkind or just oversharing or like, you know, being too much? Like, because I've been in situations where I've been too authentic, you know what I mean? I've shared too much, I've been too much myself. And I'm like, is it me or is it the situation? I can't tell.
I think what Kishore is actually asking is when does keeping it real go wrong?
Yes, yes, yes. That's it. That's exactly what I'm asking. Oh my god, I love that show.
It sounds like a TV series with like 8 sequels. When Keeping It
There's a
Real goes
no.
wrong.
That was in Dave.
Season 7.
No, that's Dave Chappelle. Back
Yeah.
back in the day when he used to do the Chappelle show, he had a whole skit when Keeping It Real goes wrong, and it was so funny.
Oh, that was an actual skit? I'm just
Yeah.
outdated.
Yeah.
Like
So with
Dial,
that,
it already happened. It already happened. I was probably in the ashram at that time. I was talking to Rasika yesterday, my wife, about how like, at 18 I moved into an ashram, and so like the entire 2000s, like I miss socially, like whatever. And now I'm like catching up. It's like 2022, and I'm like, this would be a great idea for a TV show. I'm like, that already happened in 2007.
Case in point, Dave Chappelle.
that's
Uh,
great. Poor Doyle. He's been sequestered.
I'm catching up, guys. I'm catching up. I've seen things. I was gonna say something. Did you want to say something, Chuta? I had something I wanted to reference in response to that. But did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
I was reading, and I don't know if I shared this already because I shared something from me before. Um, but what? what came to my mind was this idea that we live in a society and culture that doesn't necessarily encourage us to, or give us a lot of space, or we don't take the space to actually reflect on how we think or feel about something. Like, what does it
Mm,
mean to be real? We're in a culture of like immediate response and judgment. Swipe right, swipe left, like, dislike, comment, share, and then move on. You know what I mean? It's like, how often do we actually like look at a post that we might see or read something on the news? It's like, even the news, it's like boom, this story, that story, this story, that story. And like, you don't even have time. There was CNN at one point was getting like super flack because when Ukraine was first attacked and they were like giving stories about like bombings, etc., there was also like in the corner like these big ads for like Walmart and Burger King and like, you know what I mean? Like, enjoy yourself, so get some chicken wings, and it was just like, and it was just like a little tone deaf, this idea, but it's like, well, we got to keep going, and it's like, oh my God, there's this war in Ukraine, and like, oh, there's an advertisement for you to go here, and it's just like, we don't have time to actually, even when we're watching the news or scrolling, or even when we're meeting somebody, to think about how we actually feel. And we're so often like, almost this pressure to um, like, before we've even had time to even assess our own selves, like, who am I? And there was this, I've been reading, I've shared this post from her, this lady, her name is Africa Brooke, and she said, this was in relation to just like social issues, etc., but it also, I think, just relates very much to like, what does it mean to be me and who am I? And she said it's never been more important to accept that most of us, I'd argue all of us, exist in the gray area, the in between, the case by case, the I don't sit neatly on any side, the I need more time to think about this before I respond, react, the I have no opinion on this, the I've changed my mind, the context matters. It's possible to honor the gray area and stand for something. And
mm,
she has this really beautiful kind of caption that she wrote. But it was this sort of idea of like, we're so for like, when we talk about what does it mean to be real? Well, who am I? It's like, well, do I create space to even like reflect? What are my values? What do I think about things? Am I allowed
mm,
to change? Um, as opposed to like, I've got to present who I am to the, what's my handle? What's my Instagram handle? What's my tagline? We were even thinking about this podcast, like, what's the name? What's the tagline? What's this? And it's like, how do you give like the immediate elevator pitch for your life to everybody? Um, and so I think that sometimes the question of like being too real is also like, first being real with ourselves and taking the time to assess that, and also leaving space for like change and growth and evolution and development. And so I was just kind of reflecting on that in my own life and the society that we live in, and the importance of allowing ourselves that time and space.
mm,
I like that a lot. And I think it also goes hand in hand with thinking about when us keeping it real then starts to move toward our detriment. And I think sometimes that can also be a really good gauge. Like, is this helping me or harming me? Because the authenticity or the keeping it real, what function was it supposed to be playing? Was it supposed to be creating a boundary where we stand up for ourselves? Was it supposed to be setting a precedent where, no, I'm going to accept who I am and embody that? But then it only goes so far, because then we have to look at it and it's like, well, is this actually harming me? Because that was like the premise of the skit.
mm,
What would happen was people would keep it real, but usually to their own detriment. And I feel like that's super smart, because really we have to look at like, what function was this serving? Was it serving any function? And if it's not serving any function, then we really have to heavily look at, okay, then why are we doing it? Because then how authentic is it? It's like, well, why
mm,
why are you doing that? It's like, oh no, it's no, have no idea. But like, it's like, well, be really intentional about your life. So I think authenticity has to go with intention, just as anything else does.
mm,
Mm,
And oh, that's right. It was making me think, because Bhagavatam, I'm always like, let's bring it. And we hear all these people in Bhagavatam, and it's like the pendulum can swing one way or the other. And I think Bhagavatam has a really good way of showing how sometimes there should be some balance. So you have the 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 story of Maharaj Bharat. So King Bharat, he's king. He decides he's going to go and do lots of meditation, and he goes to the forest. And when he gets to the forest, there's a baby deer, and he kind of really takes that baby deer in, takes it as a pet, but really starts thinking about the baby deer and does nothing toward his spiritual advancement anymore. And not so much, kind of like falls off. Everything's about this deer. The deer leaves. He catches like a bit of a. I always felt like I was like, is this a heart attack? Like, what happened to him? Anyhow, catches catches a bit of an issue. He's lamenting after the deer. He dies, then becomes a deer, but can remember all of the previous incidents. So he kind of keeps himself apart. Then he gets another birth as a human, and then this time he swings totally the other way. It's like, I'm not going to engage at all, even to the point where they're just going to think I'm completely crazy. And I'm like, he goes full tilt the other direction. He won't speak anything that makes sense. He won't do anything that makes sense. And his family keeps trying to make him make sense, and it doesn't happen. And now this works toward his detriment. His parents die, and he has these brothers that don't care about him, and they leave him out in a rice paddy field. He gets abducted by people who want to make him a human sacrifice. He gets saved by the supreme person, but this is like now working toward his detriment. Then he meets a king, and then finally the king also wants to like beat him into submission. And I mean, because the dude looks homeless and a little bit crazy, which we should be used to in New York. And finally, he gives all of these like profound realizations to this king. It's like, actually, none of us are doing anything because we're in the material world. We're actually souls having these experiences. And because he can remember all his past lives, it's like, if you could remember all the things, you might have gone full tilt too. So, but yeah, it's like, when does that, we're all walking this line, and sometimes our authenticity goes with what we can get away with.
Mm,
Because in some circles, we're like, no, I'm keeping it real. I don't wear masks. It's like, but if you want to fly on a plane, like, no, I'm gonna put that mask on. It's like, so you do what you can get away with. So sometimes I'm like, is it authenticity, or are we just being stubborn in our causeless unwillingness to serve anyone or
Mm.
anything?
mm,
Yeah, I'll also just as you were saying that, I think authenticity also couples very closely with validation, because the idea of like being authentic, am I trying to express something or prove something? And sometimes we're trying to convince ourselves who we are in the way that we express it to another person. And it's like, this is who I am. And it's just like, we've struggled to accept who we are in such a big way that we emphatically put it out there into the world. And it's like, I want people to know it because there's sometimes there could be an insecurity about it, or sometimes it can just be, so that's sometimes, not always, but like, how much am I expressing something because it's just who I am? Or how much am I trying to like prove something or prove a point or stamp something on something? Um, how much am I trying to change people? And I think the most powerful way about it is like, when being real, when being too real goes wrong, that we find actually um, that um, we discover who our people are, you know, because when we simply decide to, rather than trying to get the world to accept me or approve of me or like me or see me in a certain way, I just exist as I am. And the people that doesn't jive with, those aren't my people. So rather than trying to get people to accept me for who I am or to like me for who I am, let them be them and roll away. And gradually, people that are looking for somebody like me will find me. And I won't sometimes notice it or even create space if I'm too preoccupied trying to fit the square pegs into the round hole of my life. And so
mm,
I think that there's sometimes I think the transition, when we think of like when being real goes wrong, it's like, oh, that didn't work out. Well, actually, maybe it worked out perfectly, because that is no longer like, that's not like, there's a shift, there's a change taking place, and you're in transition. It's not that you lost a friend, it's that you are transitioning and creating space so that you can stick the flag of who you are in the ground, and then like the surroundings will adjust.
mm. I really love what Arushi just said. She said, my therapist told me that it's okay to pretend sometimes. By pretending to be a certain version of yourself while being with a group of people, we learn whether we like that version of ourselves or not. Through this process and analyzing different versions of ourselves, we get to know ourselves. And I really like this because while both you, Dayal, and Achuta were speaking, I was really thinking about how, like, there's my material identity, and we've talked about these concepts a lot, like these past few weeks, right? Like my personal swadharma, my personal swabhava. What is my dharma in this life? What is my bodily conditioning and situation in this life? And I think that there has to kind of be like an acceptance that, like, we live in the material world. This is the material body that I'm living in. This is this some scars and stuff that I'm working through, and therefore that's gonna cause me to be in society a certain way, and it's going to cause society to view me in a certain way. And therefore, I really, bringing it back to what Arushi said, it's like, yeah, sometimes I've had to do this a lot, like test out certain identities in certain social situations to see, like, is this okay, is this not okay, am I safe here, am I not safe here, do I like who I am around these people, do I not like who I am around these people. And I think that anyone who has gone through, like, I was raised in a very religious family, and then I, like, totally went the other direction. I was just like, I'm free, I'm gonna do what I want. Like, I don't know about, I don't know. I never was like, I never ever called myself an atheist, and I'm very happy about that. I always believed in God, but I was like very against like religion because I grew up in a very religious household, like extremely orthodox type of religion. And so I was very like, down with the establishment and just like freedom and whatever. And anyway, so I went like the total other direction where I was just like doing that whole kind of life, material life. And then when I met the devotees, but it took me like, I met the devotees when I was young, 21, but it took me a couple of years to really start to take it seriously. And it was really, really interesting. And I'm sure that others might go through this. And I know of people who go through this, but when you start taking devotional life more seriously and you are in a more materialistic kind of life, the people that you were with before will start being like, what are you doing? Like, what? You're not coming out to the bars anymore. You're not coming out to party anymore. You're not coming out to do this thing anymore that you used to come and do with us. You're going to this kirtan. What? You're chanting what? Are you a Hare Krishna? Like, what's going on, right? And it's so interesting because in those moments, and it doesn't have to be like coming into bhakti. It could be like when you're having a shift in life, or when you're taking a next step in life, like you'll start to see how people view you is really based on like this box. We've been talking about this box that they've placed you in, or this like, yeah, material kind of context that they've put you in. And I really love that quote that you read, Dayal, at the beginning, because it's like who we are materially is going to constantly be shifting in this life, actually, right? It's like we're born in this body, but like if we look at who I was 5 years ago, if I look at who I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was 3 years old, baby, right? Like totally different people, right? Same body, but totally different people. And it's like, so that's going to change. But what I really love about these practices of bhakti that keep us really situated, rightly situated, is that the nature of the soul, we're told, is the same for everyone. And I think that that's extremely comforting, that the nature of the soul is to have this loving relationship with a higher power, is to be in service of that higher power, and therefore be in service of everyone else. And that, I feel like, really levels the playing ground. And that's why I think bhakti is so powerful for society, because I think we're living in a place in society where it's like, no, I'm better. No, I'm better. No, my struggle's worse. No, my struggle's worse. No, I'm important. No, I'm important. And it's like all these identities are just clashing. And I think bhakti is a place where we can say like, yeah, I have these identities and you have those identities and etc. But we're all here for a common purpose or a common goal. And that's it. That is to discover who we are beyond these identities. Like, okay, like Achuta was saying yesterday, I'm a girl from Jamaica, Queens. That's a part of who I am. That doesn't define who I am, right? And people will start to like have a when you realize that, like I've noticed that for myself, and I want to hear from all of you. I've been talking a lot, but I've noticed that for myself when you realize, like you, me, when I realize I am not that identity. That identity is something that is a part of me. And you start to act in that way, you'll notice that there might be a little bit of a societal rub because society is so like, no, no, that's who you are. Like you are that girl from Jamaica Queens, Achuta. So what was it, Achuta? Like, can you write like that or can you speak a little bit more? I was expecting a little bit more of that person. And it's like, oh, Krishna. Okay, I want to hear from Dayal or Achuta because I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And I what goes along with that is it's like, oh, can I hear more from that person? And I'm like, who is that person? What makes you think that I've ever like what what are you expecting from that person? And who is that? When have I ever like it's like there's some people they have their they have the regular speaking voice, and then you have your customer service voice, and everybody makes jokes about it because it's super true. It's like it doesn't matter where you come from, your customer service voice has gone to Harvard. Okay, you figured it out. You figured out a way to sound professional and crisp and clear on the phone. But it's like those people who are like, I'm just being honest. And that kind of falls into this same realm of like, this is who I am, just being honest. And for me, the the learning to pretend and move through worlds came much later because I didn't have friends as a kid. Like for until I was like 14, I didn't have friends. And everywhere I went was this constant like not fitting in and not even anybody willing to like look at like, what's this person like? It was just a straight cut off, no friends. And I'm a person who was always intuitive. So it's like when you have a good BS meter and no friends, then later on when you do get around people and you're interacting with people and they're like, no, I'm really sorry. I was always like, no, that's not what you meant. What are you talking about? Why would you even say that? Like, why are we pretending? And that also still got me no friends. And so I had to really take a hard look at like, okay, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And then what does that
Mm,
do the two intersect? Where? And then how can you figure out how to juggle that but also stay authentic? Which I think has
Mm,
been one of those like lifelong journeys. Still going.
yeah. Being friends with the Chuta has been really good for my self-esteem because I know she has such a high BS barometer that if there was enough, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. And so I say that with confidence and gratitude. And you guys are great. I love you guys so much. And thank you, Kishore. What you shared was super beautiful. And Chuta, you were always keeping it real. And love you guys. And I want to hear from Kimberly. She always got some sweet takeaways for us, something we can remember, put in our pocket, and take home. And then we'll close out.
Creating space to reflect on our values rather than habitually reacting. It's possible to honor the gray area and be intentionally authentic, and the right people will be drawn to you.
Be authentic, and the right people will draw to you. Love that. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I'm noticing every day we're growing this little live studio audience. If you want to join us live, please check out bhakticenter.org or write us at info@bhakticenter.org and we can get you a link to join in our live audience. If you're curious or interested to take any journeys with us or classes or courses, tune into bhakticenter.org. We always love to stay connected. Please be well, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye, everybody.
I don't know how to stop the recording on my phone. Oh, here it is. Here it is. I did it. Sorry, money.
You know,